Hello, this is Franco Cabral broadcasting from the Honest Liar podcast, a conversation around finding the inner liar within all of us and leveraging the truth across all areas of your life. Today's topic is bright fire. So this episode actually is the first time that I've taken a week off since I started the podcast. And this is 2 weeks since you probably heard my last episode. And I'm not going to make excuses. I had a pretty epic week and weekend accomplishing one of my targets that I set out to do in the beginning of the year. I had a vision when I set my targets in the beginning of 2020, and one of the most important visions that I had was reconnecting with my wife on a much deeper level than ever. And I had this vision of us renewing our vows. And we, as I've discussed in this podcast, especially my Origins podcast, if you haven't listened, go back. You can understand a little bit more about what this really means to me. But my wife and I have come from a full 180 turn over the last 2 years. We've come from a very dark place where we were on the verge of divorce for a little bit. And we celebrated the culmination of the mountain that we've climbed together over the last 2 years this past weekend when we renewed our vows with our closest, about 35 friends present for what I described as an epic and divine experience. Those were my words that I used in my weekly Forge Legend plan that I've been doing throughout the course of this year. And it was really that. I mean, we had the most epic experience with our family that felt completely divine. There was this bright fire that was felt throughout the entire weekend. One of my coaches and mentors and very close friends was the one who was the officiant of this experience for us. And it was a very powerful moment also to have him present because he had been there through the darkest times and he was able to really capture throughout the experience and his communication during the renewal of vows what this process has been like and what this past weekend experience was really about. He mentioned when he was talking to us, and he took everybody through an experience where he asked us all to close our eyes as my wife and I were standing in front of him, witnessed with all of our family and friends closest there in our Vermont favorite place. And he asked us to all close our eyes. And he took us through this evolution where he basically pointed out the fact that 11 years ago, when I chose to marry my wife and she chose to marry me, we chose from a place of blind and being in the dark. Our eyes were closed. Nobody truly knows what it's like to get married and what the experience and the journey that's going to come with that. So when you choose to get married, you're really choosing from a place of blind. Now, fast forward 11 years and many stories and triumphs and tribulations and dark and light and all the experiences that come with marriage and building a family and all the experiences of being a parent, the good, the bad, the ugly. Here we were when he asked us to open our eyes and he said, this is now the place of what this union means. We're choosing each other with eyes wide open. With all of the dark, all of the light, all of the truth that we know about one another, we're choosing each other with our eyes wide open. And this was it was such a powerful moment looking at my wife with my eyes teary-eyed, tears running down both our cheeks, recognizing that we have made it to this place where we are completely open with one another. We know each other and we're choosing each other with our eyes wide open. This created such a fire in us throughout this weekend and was felt by all of the people that were there. And everybody described the experience of the weekend as just divine, and God's presence was felt, and love and connection and fire and so many beautiful words and messages that we got from everybody. And one of the things that we did over the course of the weekend is we literally had fires going. We had an outdoor fire that myself and some of my friends put together. We had a bonfire going that went from Friday, and we kept it going for 48 hours pretty much until Sunday. And it was a beautiful fire that created so many memories that we shared throughout the weekend. Silly moments, dancing by the fire, connected moments, deep moments, and everybody was enamored by the fire of the fire pit. And obviously the fire of what we were all experiencing, hence the term of bright fire for this, or the topic of bright fire for this podcast. And I had a moment on Sunday night, actually Saturday night, as everybody was pretty much turning down for the night, and there was a fire that we had going on inside the house. It was a beautiful fire that we have at our house in Vermont. It's one of my favorite spots in the house, and I realized that the fire was starting to die out. And I wanted the fire to go on a little bit longer in the inside fire. The outside fire was still going till Sunday, but there was just a few coals left in this fire. And I started trying to revive the fire without any lighter fluid or any fire starters. I put one piece of wood and I started blowing on the fire, giving it oxygen, trying to ignite the next piece of wood. And I enjoy making fires. And as I was doing this, it hit me. The process, nobody was watching me trying to revive this fire. And I was all alone as I was trying to spark this fire that was almost dying. And it made me realize this was so symbolic of where my wife and I were 2 years ago. We had a fire that was starting to die, and there was coals left. And people got to see in our renewal of vows a bright fire that was burning, and you could feel the energy in the fire. But what they didn't see was the process by which my wife and I had to work alone in the dark, rekindling this fire, and the pain that went through it, and the commitment and the challenges and the adversity and the fear and all the darkness that went to creating this massive light that everybody else got to see. But what they didn't see was the work that happened in the dark, and the work that happened prior, and how we built this fire together. The process of building a fire takes time, and you have to nurture it, and you have to be intentional. And this is what I was doing on Saturday night as I was trying to revive this fire. I didn't really recognize this until later on as I reflected. Once I got the fire going, people started to come in. We had a jacuzzi session and people were outside, but for whatever reason, while I was building this fire, nobody was present with me as I'm blowing on the fire. I'm trying to restart it, reignite it, and it's taking me a long time. It probably took me about 30 to 45 minutes to really get this fire going, because I was, number one, being a little stubborn. I didn't want to get the fire started with, fire starter or kerosene. And I was really enjoying the process. And then I sat there as the fire was going and people starting to come in and they were saying, wow, what a great fire. I realized, people just saw the brightness of the fire, but they didn't see the process behind what it really took to build that fire. And they got to enjoy the light. Who doesn't want to enjoy the light? Who doesn't want to enjoy the big fire? And I had a vision when I started this year, and I knew that was the fire I was looking for. I kept saying that I want to have a marriage that's on fire. I want to renew our vows. I had no fucking clue what that meant when I said that in the beginning of the year, but I had this vision of a fire within my marriage. And I didn't anticipate the work that was actually going to happen or need to happen for that weekend to happen, for our renewal of vows, for this moment that I had by the fire to actually have existed. But I was committed to the vision, and my wife was committed to the vision, and we had a very clear why. Our children were definitely the biggest catalyst in that process, and also knowing that we had deep love for one another, but we just had let the fire dwindle out and almost be beyond the point of reviving. So I had this powerful moment and experience by the fire, and it made me, one of the things that came into my head was to record a podcast to talk about how this fire happened. Because it's easy to see the top of the mountain or the peak, as many entrepreneurs share, whether it's in business or a marriage that's in a great place or your body that's, elite. People see that piece, but what they don't see is the vision that had to happen prior, and then the commitment to go, and the daily commitment, and the commitment to dive into the pain of what's required. For the last 2 years, I have been sending my wife daily messages of love, appreciation, and honor. I sent her those messages way before she trusted where those messages were coming from. She actually told me when I started sending them, she said, I'm glad that you're excited about something new. I'm just wondering, when is it going to stop? And that was pretty real and hurtful, but she was 100% honest. And I needed to hear that because I had been inconsistent in the past. I got excited and then I stopped. And something sparked within me that I am committed to loving my wife every single day. And I showed her that commitment on the good days, the bad days, and the ugly days. So daily commitments was one of the ways that we started to rekindle this fire. The other thing was date nights. It sounds simple, but when you're looking to date somebody, when you're not married or not in a relationship, usually we have an understanding of what it takes to date. We grew up dating, and the idea of courtship is not something that's foreign to any of us. But for some reason, when we get married or when we succeed at something, there's this fucked up thing that happens that we get comfortable. We've climbed to the top of the mountain and somehow we think that, okay, we can rest on our laurels. And, we don't have to continue to be intentional about building to the next peak or keeping that fire lit. And over time, we let that comfort, and that comfort is slowly what starts to kill the fire. So date nights, stop happening. We get into a place of comfort and, things start to slide. And that was the place that I was in with my wife 2 years ago. We made a recommitment to work on developing a new marriage, a new relationship. And one of the things that we committed to was doing weekly date nights. And to this day, throughout the course of a year, we've hit probably about 95% of the weeks with a date night. And date nights, there's a check the box date night, which means you go out to dinner and you maybe create a little space. But that's very different than when you first started dating somebody. When you first start dating somebody, you get excited. There's a pre-energy that happens prior to the date that also adds tremendous value to the date and makes the experience way beyond just that few hours that you spend with somebody. There's sending messages. I'm looking forward to our date. Maybe you get a haircut. Maybe you buy a new outfit. Maybe you engineer something special as a surprise. And then you go on this experience and you reflect on it, and then you send messages afterwards. I really had a great time. We built a great connection. I had fun. So these dates continued to evolve for us, but we stayed loyal and committed to the vision. And there was many other things, powerful, deep, honest conversations. Vulnerability was a huge thing that also got us to this place. And many other tactics and intentions that we created that built this bright fire. But as I was sitting by the fire, literally, that I created, it really hit me, is that I can have this beautiful bright light and fire within my marriage or any part of my life. But if I'm not intentional about keeping this fire lit and on fire and adding fuel to the fire and giving it love and attention and not letting it dwindle, it's gonna cost me a lot of pain and grief to then restart the fire, or I might not be able to restart the fire again. It's significantly easier to keep a fire lit when it's already a massive fire. And that was the other reflection that I had around the fire that we made outside. The fire that we made outside was made with the intention of really getting it hot so that we could keep it going for a long period of time. So that fire we needed more intention. We had a stronger base. We had a strategy and a plan. We had more wood ready to go so that we can keep it going once it was going. We had a team of people that I had working on this fire, my friends. We were all watching it. And that also gave me a different insight, about marriage or anything that I want to be successful at is it requires a team. It requires a village. In the case of my marriage, it requires my wife being on the same page as me. It requires making sure that we have a team of babysitters that we're both comfortable with, that, we lean on sometimes our family for support, our business, that I communicate how important it is, that I protect that space with my wife, that we're intentional about it, that we keep it going, that we do the daily deposits. There's so much that goes involved, but all of those things are significantly easier to do once the fire's lit and once we just keep it going versus this constant cycle that becomes exhausting of building a fire and letting it burn and letting it go. And then building a fire and then letting it burn. And this build, burn scenario eventually is what ends marriages, is what ends businesses, what ends, our body and the success we have. It ended for a moment in time, my relationship with God, because the build burn is just fucking exhausting and it's not sustainable over time. So if you've done some hard work in rebuilding, or you need to do some hard work in rebuilding any one area of your life, I'd have you consider that build a fire to last. Don't just be in a rush to build a quick spark so you can feel a little bit better in the moment, because then you're going to constantly be needing to try and respark versus keeping a fire that's strong going. It takes so much less energy over time. And that's the lesson that I wanted to leave you guys with today. If you want a bright fire in any area of your life, build a fire and with the intention of creating a fire that's going to last, and the intention of keeping it going on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis, because your fire is not going to stay lit just because you built a massive fire. Eventually, if you stop paying attention to it, the fire will die down and you're going to have to rebuild from scratch, or you're going to be too tired to rebuild from scratch. So this is a reminder to me to keep this fire lit within my marriage, within my life, and all the things that I've created, and all the things that I still desire to create. Create it with the intention of building a fire to last, because that's the one that is easiest over time to maintain versus this constant cycle of build and burn. Thank you for tuning in to the Honest Liar podcast, a conversation around finding the inner liar within all of us and leveraging the truth to create expansion across all areas of your life. If you found value in the podcast, please share this with someone else you think will find value, and also please rate and review the show, as it helps with spreading light, which is my mission. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day.